Alex, is the Job Guide 360 interview guide worth it?
Honestly, yes, the guide is highly insightful. I recommend it to everyone.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the strategic core of product design. We're looking past the pixels.
Yeah, we are. And our source material isn't the usual glossy case studies.
No, it's actually a pretty dense stack of interview questions, the kind designed to really test strategic thinking.
Exactly. So our mission today is kind of reverse engineer what makes a successful product designer tick, especially in, those super fast-paced startup environments.
Right.
This isn't about just having the right answers memorized. It's about understanding the mindset.
The mindset.
Yeah, the mental models they use to handle trade-offs, figure out what actually makes an impact, and crucially, drive business results.
So moving beyond just the tools and deliverables, focusing purely on the strategy and the synthesis.
Precisely.
Okay, so over this deep dive, we're planning to unpack 3 key areas, right? First, how designers manage their process when things are moving incredibly fast.
Mm-hmm.
Second, how they deal with those tricky strategic trade-offs using actual evidence.
Yeah, the balancing act.
And finally, how they manage to scale their impact through better collaboration and building systems.
Sounds good. Let's dive in.
Okay, so we all kind of know the textbook design process, right? You research, define, ideate, prototype, test, iterate.
The classic loop.
Exactly. But say a startup needs something critical shipped in like 3 weeks, that textbook probably goes out the window.
Oh, absolutely. It has to.
So when you have to compress things, what's the bit that traditional design thinking warns you not to cut, but that strategic designers often find themselves needing to condense anyway?
Well, you can't really cut learning, but you absolutely have to time box it aggressively.
Time box it, okay.
Yeah, traditional training might push for this long, dedicated discovery phase, but strategically, you swap that for, let's call it scrappy research.
Scrappy research.
Yeah, instead of, say, a month of deep interviews, maybe you run just 2 or 3 really quick usability tests or some rapid market analysis. It's about pragmatism.
Right.
You ship an MVP, a minimum viable product, fast. But, and this is critical, you launch it with really clear hypotheses.
So you know what you're trying to learn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the next iteration is already being planned right from the start, before the first version even ships. It's, commitment to learning quickly, on the fly.
And making that rapid learning effective means choosing the right stuff to test with. You don't want to spend ages polishing something if the basic idea is flawed.
Definitely not.
So how does that strategic designer figure out the right level of fidelity for their prototypes? Is it always high fidelity?
No, not at all. It has to be driven by risk and tied directly to the specific question you need answered right now.
Okay, risk-based. Give me an example.
Sure. If the question is simple, like, does this basic user flow even make sense? Then lo-fi sketches or basic wireframes are fine. Low risk, low investment. But if the risk is higher, maybe you're testing subtle interaction details or motion or complex state changes, then you'll need mid to high fidelity. You might even use something like Framer to really nail the motion.
Right, for those nuances.
Yeah. And only if the absolute critical risk involves visual polish or brand perception, or if the final UI look is integral to what you're testing, only then do you invest the time in near final visuals.
That makes sense. Risk dictates the fidelity. So, okay, you figured out the fidelity. Now the really tough part. Deciding what tiny slice of the big vision actually gets built, especially with, say, very limited engineering resources. How do designers make those cuts without shipping something totally useless?
Yeah, this is where strategy gets, ruthless sometimes. You absolutely have to define the core job to be done. What is the absolute minimum this thing needs to do? Then you strip away everything else. Aggressively. Pretty much. Down to the smallest possible slice that still proves the core value proposition. Forget edge cases, forget nice to haves, forget secondary paths for now.
Wow.
Maybe that means it only covers one single use case. Maybe the UI is super minimal. Maybe, just maybe, the back end is even manual for a little while, just to validate the front end experience. The goal is validation, not perfection. Not yet.
And in those really lean setups, the designer often ends up doing more than just design, right? We hear about designers needing to wear multiple hats.
Oh, it's totally essential. The designer often becomes the emergency generalist.
Yeah.
Our sources mention designers stepping up to write some basic user-focused copy or setting up simple event tracking and analytics so you actually get data from the beta.
Right, so you can measure.
Yeah, or even using something like Webflow, a no-code tool, to quickly throw up a landing page. It's about stretching to unblock the team and launch faster. It's a big ask, though.
It definitely sounds like it. So the strategic designer is less a pure specialist, more of a, well, like you said, an emergency generalist, which must create some debt if you're not careful.
It can.
So when you are shipping under those crazy deadlines, what actually gets cut? And how do you make sure the quality of what you do ship doesn't completely fall apart?
Documentation becomes key here. When you cut stuff secondary states, polish that isn't core, you have to explicitly document it as design debt.
Design debt, like technical debt.
Exactly the same principle. It's a promise to come back and fix it or build it out later. And to protect the quality of the core thing you are shipping, you need a really focused QA checklist. Hyper-focused.
Okay.
Making sure that one slice, the core experience, is solid, usable, and relatively bug-free, even if the bells and whistles are missing for now.
That clarity around managing process and documenting debt flows really nicely into our second area, strategic trade-offs. Because the best designers aren't just executing tasks, right? They're constantly mediating between what users want, what the business needs, and what's technically possible.
Yes, precisely. And making those trade-offs explicit is a critical skill. Think about a classic example. Redesigning a pricing page. Initial research might show users saying they want really granular comparison tools. Complex dynamic tables comparing every single feature.
Yeah, I can picture that.
But the business goal, it's simpler. Lift conversions, and then boom, the technical constraint hits. Engineering says they can't build complex dynamic tables within the required timeline.
Okay, classic conflict. So the user wants X, tech can't build X, business needs Y. How does the designer resolve that without just giving up?
They have to pivot the solution. They can't deliver exactly what users said they wanted. So instead of those complex tables, maybe they prioritize a much simpler tiered layout that engineering can deliver quickly.
Right.
But, and here's the clever part, they add contextual tooltips or maybe learn more links to provide that granular detail on demand.
So they mitigate the lack of the big table.
Exactly. It meets the user's underlying need for detail without the technical complexity. The trade-off is explicit. We chose speed and deliverability over having everything visible at once. And in the example from our sources, that simpler approach actually led to a 12% lift in trial signups.
Wow. So simpler was actually better for the business goal, even if it wasn't what users initially asked for.
Often happens. Sometimes less is more, especially if it gets the user to the core value faster.
That's a great example of evidence guiding the trade-off. Now, speaking of constraints and trade-offs, what about accessibility and inclusive design? In that rush for speed, isn't it tempting to push something like WCAG 2.1 AA compliance to later?
It's tempting, sure, but it's strategically wrong and risky.
Why?
Because treating accessibility as an add-on later creates massive technical debt. It's much harder and more expensive to fix later. Plus, potential legal risks. A strategic designer builds it in from the start.
So WCAG 2.1 AA, that's the standard.
It is. It's the globally recognized benchmark. And the AA level is generally what industry aims for. It means thinking about things like color contrast right from the design token stage, ensuring keyboard navigation works well with clear focus states, testing with screen readers.
It sounds fundamental.
It is. It's a core responsibility, definitely not a nice-to-have luxury item.
Okay, good point. Let's talk about a more dramatic shift. It's one thing to tweak a design based on feedback, but we want examples where research truly forced a fundamental change in direction. Where did a core assumption get completely debunked?
Yeah, the sources had a really good one about dashboard design. The internal team, the stakeholders, were convinced that users were desperate for tons of customization options. Widgets, toggles, endless controls.
Like, let the user build their perfect view.
That was the assumption. But then they did the research interviews, card sorting exercises, and the evidence pointed completely the other way. Users weren't asking for more customization. They were actually feeling overwhelmed by the existing options. What they really needed were clearer defaults and maybe a few well-thought-out, opinionated presets that just worked for 80% of their common tasks.
So instead of optimizing the customization feature, they basically validated the need to reduce it or remove it.
Pretty much. They shifted from more options to smarter defaults.
And what was the impact? Did it work?
Huge impact. Simplifying things, reducing that cognitive load, led to a dramatic improvement. Task completion rates went up by 22%.
Wow, 22%.
Yeah. And it perfectly highlights that balance you need between data and intuition, or rather, quantitative and qualitative data.
How so?
Use the quantitative data, the analytics, to spot where the problems are, the friction points, and then to measure the outcome of your changes. But you absolutely need the qualitative research, the interviews, the usability tests to understand the why. Why are users struggling? Why did the change work?
Right, the story behind the numbers.
Exactly. And you have to be careful too. Set guardrails so you don't fall into the trap of just optimizing for a single metric, like say click-through rate, if doing that actually makes the product harder to understand or erodes user trust long term.
That makes sense. Okay, so you've launched, you've hopefully made an impact. How do you actually measure that success post-launch? It can't just be, did it ship?
No, definitely not. Success metrics have to be defined up front, usually in collaboration with the product manager.
Like what? What kind of metric?
Things like activation rate, are new users completing key first steps, time to first value, how quickly do they get something useful done,
Right.
task completion time, maybe net promoter score or NPS. It depends on the feature.
Okay.
The designer's role is often ensuring the right events are instrumented so you can track these things. And then critically, closing the loop. Monitoring the dashboards, yes, but also watching session replays, maybe doing follow-up interviews to add that qualitative layer to the quantitative data.
Got it. But what if you're in that common startup situation? Limited research budget, maybe no dedicated researcher on the team. How do you get these insights then?
Yeah, super common. You have to embrace the lean, scrappy approach again.
Back to scratch.
Back to scrappy. Focus your limited resources laser sharp on testing only the absolute riskiest assumptions.
Okay.
This usually means running small batches of quick, focused usability tests. You know, the classic 5 users is enough to spot major issues. Approach often holds true here. Maybe 7 for a bit more confidence.
5 to 7 users. Manageable.
Totally. Supplement that with low-cost methods, like intercept surveys on your site, digging through support call transcripts or chat logs, gold mines of user pain points.
Using existing data.
Exactly. And session replay tools. They can give you incredible insight into where users are struggling without needing massive budgets or a dedicated research team. It's about being resourceful.
Okay, so we've seen the designer as this individual strategist navigating process and trade-offs. But design doesn't happen in a vacuum. How do they scale that strategic quality, build alignment, and create systems, especially as a team grows? Let's start with collaboration. How does a designer really foster that sense of shared ownership with product managers and engineers? Make it feel like everyone's responsible for the outcome.
It really boils down to involving them super early and continuously, not just showing them mock-ups at the end.
Right.
We're talking joint discovery sessions with the PM right at the beginning, running early technical feasibility checks with engineers before the design gets too detailed or set in stone.
So checking possibility early.
Yeah, is this even buildable? What are the tech hurdles? And using shared artifacts helps massively. Things like interactive prototypes everyone can click through, maybe in Figma, and crucially, shared acceptance criteria.
Acceptance criteria.
Yeah, the checklist of what done actually means. When engineering helps define those criteria, they have a much stronger sense of ownership over meeting them.
Makes sense. Okay, but startups are often swimming in ambiguity. Requirements can be vague, the direction unclear. What's the designer's primary role when faced with that kind of fog?
Their job is to create clarity, to take that ambiguity and translate it into something structured and testable.
How?
Often, a really effective way is to draft a simple one-pager. Just outline, here's what we think the goal is. Here are the metrics we think matter. Here are the constraints we know about. And here are our biggest assumptions.
Laying it all out.
Exactly. It forces clarity for the whole team. Then you can say, okay, what's the absolute riskiest assumption on this page? And you design a lightweight prototype or experiment specifically to test that one thing first. It prevents analysis paralysis and gets things moving.
That sounds practical, but what about when alignment just completely breaks down? You know, you have conflicting stakeholder feedback, maybe senior leaders who strongly disagree on the direction. That must be tough.
Oh, it's super tough. The strategic play here is for the designer to act as the objective facilitator. Okay, you have to gently pull everyone back to the fundamentals. What was the original problem we agreed we were solving? What were the success metrics we all signed off on?
Grounding the conversation in facts, not opinions.
Exactly. And if the disagreement really boils down to personal preference or differing opinions rather than solid evidence, the best tool in the designer's kit is often proposing a small, focused A/B test.
Let the data decide.
Pretty much.
Yep.
It takes the personal bias out of it, keeps the decision objective, and lets you find the best path forward without escalating conflict or someone just pulling rank.
Smart. Okay, shifting gears slightly. How do you maintain design quality and speed when the team is maybe doubling every 6 months? How do you operationalize quality at scale?
Yeah, that's a huge challenge. The core answer, almost universally now, is a robust design system.
Right, the design system, more than just component.
Oh, much more. Yes, it includes the library of reusable components in Figma or whatever tool. But critically, it's built on design tokens, those fundamental values for color, typography, spacing. That's the foundation.
Tokens, got it.
Then you need standardized, well-documented components built using those tokens. But the system only works if you have good governance.
Governance, what does that involve?
Things like running regular audits to find inconsistencies or outdated patterns, having a clear process for teams to request new components or changes, tracking usage, and super important, partnering closely with engineering to ensure there's a matching, synced code library. It has to live in both design and code.
And this actually makes a difference. It's not just like internal housekeeping.
No, the impact is very real. The sources had an example where implementing a mature design system cut the time needed to ship new features by about 25%.
25%, that's huge.
It is, because designers and engineers aren't constantly reinventing the wheel, debating styles, or building one-off solutions. It's a massive strategic investment in efficiency and consistency.
Definitely sounds like it. Okay, a quick side note on craft. We touched on motion and micro interactions earlier. When are they actually helpful and when do they just add clutter?
Good question. Motion should always serve a clear purpose. It should communicate state changes like confirming a button press, or guide the user's attention smoothly, or reduce cognitive load by clarifying transitions between views.
So functional motion.
Functional motion, exactly. Think of those subtle animations that provide feedback or create a sense of continuity. If a motion doesn't actually clarify something or tangibly improve usability, it's probably just decoration, visual noise. And a strategic designer is often ruthless about cutting that extraneous stuff to keep the interface clean and fast.
Keep it lean. Okay, final area. Let's talk about the designer themselves, their growth. If a designer joins a company and is tasked with improving, say, the product's onboarding experience in their first 90 days, what's the strategic approach? They can't boil the ocean.
No, definitely not. The key is a phased approach grounded in diagnosis first.
Okay.
So, day 1 through 30. Pure discovery, dive into analytics, scour support tickets for common onboarding complaints, watch session replays like crazy to map out exactly where users are dropping off and try to figure out why.
Find the pain points.
Precisely. Then, day 31 through 60 is focused action based on that diagnosis. Run those targeted user interviews or usability tests, maybe 5 to 7 people, specifically on the critical drop-off points you identify.
Validate the problems.
Yes. And then, day 61 through 90 is about delivery. Start with the quick wins, the low-hanging fruit, maybe clarifying some confusing copy or restructuring a flow using progressive disclosure, things that have high impact but are relatively easy to implement.
Get some momentum.
Exactly. Follow that with a plan for a more phased redesign of the bigger issues, all while measuring impact against those key onboarding metrics, like activation rate or time to first value.
That sounds like a solid plan. And zooming out from that specific task, how does a good designer ensure their own skills stay sharp in a field that changes so fast?
It really requires a conscious, dedicated growth strategy. You can't just hope it happens. Good designers often allocate specific time each week just for learning, reading detailed case studies, exploring new tools or techniques. They proactively identify skill gaps and take targeted courses, maybe in advanced analytics or accessibility or AI and design.
Deliberate learning.
Very deliberate. And one really critical thing, seeking out feedback and mentorship from peers outside their own company.
Outside? Why outside?
To break out of the internal echo chamber. It's easy for a team to develop blind spots or get stuck in the way we do things here. Getting external perspectives is crucial for staying fresh and challenging your own assumptions.
Okay, so pulling all this together, the big realization from digging into these sources, these interview questions, seems clear. The truly successful product designer isn't primarily defined by just their visual skills or aesthetic taste.
Not at all. The successful product designer is really a strategic synthesizer. They juggle conflicting demands constantly. They prioritize hard evidence and research over gut feelings or assumptions. They focus on creating clarity and alignment across teams, not just working in isolation. And they frame every single design decision fundamentally as a strategic trade-off, one that needs to be justified by its potential impact on the business or on real user value.
Yeah, and I think the most valuable underlying skill we saw highlighted again and again is simply the ability to articulate why a decision was made, why a trade-off was necessary, especially when things are complex or there's conflict.
Absolutely. Being able to explain the rationale is key.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener.
We heard designers talk quite a bit about formally documenting debt, design debt, deferred features when they had to ship quickly under pressure.
Right, tracking what got cut.
So the question for you is, how could you apply that concept of formally tracking debt to other areas? Maybe in your own work, maybe even personal projects, where you know you're choosing speed over long-term quality or efficiency.
Yeah. When are you strategically deferring something important for the sake of getting something out the door faster?
And crucially, are you actually tracking that debt, making a note of it so you have a real plan to go back and address it later? Or is it just getting swept under the rug? Something to think about.